I have the great privilege of introducing our speaker this morning, Barbara Bartolome. But after music like this and meditation like Bruce gave us, and this inspirational reading just blew me away today. Writings on rocks in Kauai. Kauai is the furthest, well, there's one little uninhabited island a little bit further west, but the western island of the Hawaiian Islands, and it's was one of the less developed. And to find this on rocks, you know, in a near-death experiencer, death begins with life, life begins with death. A door must close for another to open. You know, have no fear, fear not death. You know, that's all there is. We can go home. That's said there. But if we go home, we're going to miss Barbara's talk. And Barbara is an experiencer. That is to say, one who's had a near-death experience. And since Barbara, and it takes a lot of us, PMH Atwater, who will be here in December, by the way, again, says that sometimes it takes 20 to 30 years for an experiencer to work through a near-death experience or a spiritual experience. And since Barbara has worked through hers, she's become extremely active in the near-death community. We see her at every major conference. She speaks at a lot of them, and she's just really a hard worker in the community. I won't give you a lot of details about her. She'll talk about herself a little bit. She was the woman of the Entrepreneur of the Year in Santa Barbara, California, a few years ago. Worked at the university, but I know Barbara from a few years now, being in the community with her, and I knew that this was the right community. Barbara says, I just love hugs. I just never get enough hugs in any given day. And I said, Barbara, you're coming to the right place. Barbara Bartolome.
I love this guy. I am so happy to be here, you guys. This energy in here is incredible, and I wish that you could all come back to Santa Barbara with me on the plane, and we could just live together. I would be so excited. Or else I'm going to have to move here. Something's going to break. This looks a lot like Oregon, where I was raised. I was one of 5 children. My mom had lost a husband when she lost him in the Korean War, and he was the jet fighter pilot for the Air Force, and that really traumatized her because she had 3 children when he died. Her youngest was 6 months old. And so I was raised, my parents got married after my mom came back and recovered from the loss, and I was one of the extra 2 children that were born from my father. And grew up in a regular just household, and my dad worked for the state of Oregon, and my mom didn't work when I was young, and it was just a regular, normal, wonderful little Salem, Oregon place to grow up and pick strawberries when you're a little kid and all sorts of fun stuff. So that's kind of my background. Then what ended up happening was that I ended up moving to Santa Barbara to marry someone that I met up in Oregon, and this is part of the story that I have to skip over for a second to tell you why I need to tell you this. But it was a wonderful place to move to Santa Barbara. It's beautiful, and it's like paradise, and very different than rain in Salem. And I'm a sunburner, so I, of course, don't even actually go out in the sun, the red hair. But what ended up happening was that I had an 8-year-old son. This is jumping forward to 1987. I was 31 years old, and I had an 8-year-old son and a 5-month-old baby daughter. And very precious 2 little kids, were just adorable in my eyes, and loved them dearly. And I had hurt my back right after the baby was born. She was about a month old when I lifted something too heavy. So be sure, you young people who are going to have a baby, make sure that you do not go around lifting things after you've had a baby, because you're very vulnerable for that. And I blew a disc out of my back. So the initial doctor told me that I saw that I would never walk again. So I was 31 years old and getting this diagnosis of never being able to walk again. Very, very hard for me. So I talked with people. I was going to a church at the time, and I talked with the people that were my friends of the church, and they said, oh, you have to go to this neurosurgeon that's here in town, and he might be able to do something more than what the orthopedic surgeon that you saw. So I did, and he was kind of cocky when I saw him, and he held up my x-rays and my tests and stuff. He said, oh, I can fix this. I wanted to believe. I really wanted to believe. 31 is not a great time to go into a wheelchair. No one wants to be in one. So he scheduled a surgery, and he got a team of another doctor to come on board, and he was an orthopedic surgeon. So they had me check into the hospital the day before the surgery. And that night, they had decided to do another test on me, which was called a myelogram. And it's where you inject dye, iodine dye, into the spinal cord, and you have the patient laying on an x-ray table, and you then tip the x-ray table because they inject it into the back of your neck, and with the gravity, the dye flows down your spine, and when it gets to the area where you've got the damage, then they take x-rays to check to see if your spinal cord was damaged when your disc blew out, because if a fragment of the disc nipped the spinal cord, I probably wouldn't be walking. So they were doing that test, and the two x-ray guys were present in the room, and a nurse was present, and the two doctors decided to come in and actually be present for the test so that they could watch up on the monitor what was seen, so that because the actual surgery was really early at 7 a.m. the next morning, and this was about 5:30 or 6 in the evening, and they wanted to go home and not have to worry about getting those test results the next morning. So lucky that they were in the room, because the x-ray tech guy, they injected the dye in, and they had me laying on an x-ray table. And I never sued anybody, I wasn't mad at anybody, but there was just a big mistake that was made. And he was talking to the guy who was the monitor person, and the two of them were talking about their weekend plans. And he mistakenly, instead of pushing the button to raise my head and lower my feet, he pushed the other button, which tipped me the wrong way. So all the dye that they just injected went right into my brain. So I had never had that test before. They told me to hold really still, and they said that if I didn't, that I would have headaches for months afterwards. And so as they're talking and the table's moving and it's kind of going and it's moving very slowly, I couldn't tell that it was being tipped the wrong way. So I started feeling really funny, and I thought, am I supposed to feel a little weird like this? And then a few seconds later, I think that all of this happened within a minute to 2 minutes. I realized that I was feeling like I was going to faint, like I was going to lose consciousness. So I thought, that's really not so good, and I wonder if that's supposed to be happening. But they were talking, and I didn't want to interrupt them. I was being polite, and so I said, I won't say anything. And so then, about maybe 30 seconds to a minute after that, I realized, okay, my eyes are starting to roll to the back of my head. I think there's something wrong. And I think I better say something. So I wanted to say something to interrupt them, but by then I actually could not speak. I couldn't figure out how to make a sound or make any noise. And I couldn't obviously lift my arms. So I was kind of laying there panicked at that point. The energy was really scary at that point, because I was thinking, oh my gosh, do they even realize that I'm going to pass out here? Is this normal? What's going on? They didn't tell me this. So the very last thing that happened before I left my body was that my eyes were rolling to the back of my head, and I couldn't control my breathing anymore. And that's what alerted them, because the guy with his finger on the button heard me hyperventilating, so I was going, and he then stopped talking to the other person and leaned over me, and he saw that my eyes were rolling back, and I was trying really hard to focus on him, but I just couldn't keep them straight. And he then raised upward, and he leaned back to see where his thumb was, and that's when he made this look like, oh my God. And right at that point, I died. And I didn't realize that that's what happened, of course. I just shut my eyes on my body, and the next second I was up on the ceiling, and I was looking down on the entire room and my body, and I said, huh, if I'm up here, my body's down there, and he's calling code blue, I think I just died. So there was panic right beforehand. I was highly panicked over what I was involved in. I'd never been in anything weird like that before. But the second I was out of my body, there was no panic whatsoever, and it was very calm, and I felt wrapped in love. Now, the reason why I felt so amazingly wrapped in love was because the minute that I said, I think I died, I realized there was an incredibly amazing presence next to me. And I don't want to impede on anyone's religions or anything, but my feeling was that it was God. It was either God, or it was Jesus, or it was, the source of everything. Whatever you want to call the words, but I felt connected to that person, to that being through eternity. I felt literally as though he'd always been there. And so now I realize everywhere I go, he's always there. That's pretty important for all of us to realize when we're going through our day, is that he's never left us. He's always with us. And I knew that there was this connection through eternity in the future, too. So it was a really amazing feeling to feel him next to me. And I said to him, as I was looking down, they were going into the resuscitation down below, and it actually seemed rather obnoxious. I was like, there was just a little sense of, do I want to go back? But I loved my children really incredibly. And my little 5-month-old daughter was this little redhead. And I'd actually had, prior to her birth, many years before her birth, I'd actually seen that she was going to come into my life. So it was this thing like, oh, I can't leave now. I need to go back. Please. Can I please go back to contribute to them? Because if I leave their lives now, they won't turn out to be the individuals and human beings that they could be with me contributing to them. So could I please go back and contribute to them? And I was asking the being, and I never looked to see if there was any physical presence. I just felt this incredible presence, and it was like if you're married to someone, or if you have your child next to you, or if you have your mother next to you, do you really need to look at her? You know who she is. She's her. You don't need to see her to know who she is, and that's just how I felt. So I was looking down and watching this whole thing unfolding down below, and they were doing CPR, and they brought in an oxygen cart. This one woman came in and put an oxygen mask on my face, and I was in an x-ray room, so they weren't prepared for me to die in the x-ray room. So this was very hard for all of them, and there was a lot of panic going on down below with, oh my God. So this being was just listening to me, and I was asking to go back. And then the second thing that kind of came to me was I had a purpose I had planned to complete in this life. And I knew it. I knew exactly what I was supposed to do, and I hadn't done it yet. So I said, I haven't completed my purpose. could I please go back to complete my purpose? I really want to work on that. So everything was happening down below, and this man came into the room, and he had a small box that he went next to the x-ray table, and he placed it on a ledge next to the x-ray table, and he started putting these white circles on my chest. I'd never had any real medical stuff before then, and so I didn't know what he was doing. And so as I was talking to God next to me, I saw him, and I didn't understand what he was doing. I understood the oxygen mask, but what was this box? So I just kind of in the midst of saying to God, when I wanted to go back, I said, what is that he's doing? Just a simple question. What is that he's doing? And I immediately was moved from up on the ceiling to right in front of the box. And it was just this kind of metallic box, and had a flip switch on the side, and it wasn't turned on yet. And the man flipped it on, and I just sat there in front of the screen, and it had this little dot, and it was, I'd never had, I don't watch TV, so I actually have no idea what it was when it first started up. And it went rolling across the screen, and I was watching it. It was making this monotone sound. And I went through the first round, and it went rolling back to the start, and went back to the start, and went across, and I was still watching it. And the third time I was about a third of the way across, and I went, oh, that's supposed to be going like that. I was watching my flat line, so I know I was dead. So the minute that I got it, though, I popped back up on the ceiling again. It was like God, I asked for something, I asked to understand something, and he immediately showed me until I got it, and then he brought me back up there. So again, I continue to say in just really gentle ways, and feeling just incredibly accepted and loved, and just in the most amazing peace. There was no fear, there was no trauma at all in the situation. It's interesting that a lot of NDEers actually don't want to go back. They don't want to go back. I think, when we talk about home, I look forward to it incredibly. I don't want to commit suicide. I don't want to exit before I'm supposed to. I don't want to hasten my death in any way, but I can't wait to go home. And the peace and the love and the acceptance and the joy that I felt up there on the ceiling was just a small part of what I was going to feel if I got to go all the way. Now, about 80% of the people who have near-death experiences actually have ones like me. They rise above an accident scene, they rise above the trauma to their body, and they don't actually go further than that. But they're given an amazing experience that changes their life, the same as the ones that go beyond and go through the tunnel and meet their deceased relatives or friends and have spiritual connections with the people that they're meeting up there and be told, you have to go back. Well, I'm up above my body, and I've said it about 4 times in really heartfelt ways that how much I really wanted to go back to be there for my children. Now, the last thing that happened before I was resuscitated was that God spoke to me. Now, you wouldn't think that he would say this, because most churches wouldn't accept what I'm saying. But I was in a marriage that was very abusive. I was previously married to someone who was an engineer, and he had had trouble with his own family. His own sisters didn't trust him. And I loved him, and I was trying very hard to help him change in his life. But after 8 years, it hadn't been okay, and it wasn't working. And I was afraid to leave. I wanted to not give up on him and try to help him beyond where he was at. And it wasn't going anywhere. I was not only being physically abused, but extreme mental abuse, real emotional abuse. And my children were actually also in that category. So I was trying to protect them and try to keep things balanced and doing everything that he wanted me to do to be perfect, but I could never be perfect. And it was a very hard place to be in. So the thing that God said to me very calmly at the end of my time up there on the ceiling with him was, if you go back, you'll still be in your marriage. What will you do? He didn't tell me what to do. He asked me, what will I do? And that really was a moment that I had to stop and think, if you let me go back, I promise you that I'll become strong enough to leave you. That was very hard. I then watched down below. What was happening was that the doctor, who was the orthopedic surgeon, was talking with the neurosurgeon that this was happening all while this was going on up above, this was happening down below. I've gone backwards a little bit in the time span. He was talking about how much time had passed and that they hadn't gotten the defib unit in there yet, which the nurse had been on the phone calling for. And so he said, I need to do precordial thump. And so the neurosurgeon and the orthopedic surgeon agreed on that. And he said, stand clear to the people who are doing CPR on me and the table. And just as this was happening, I was talking to God about, he'd asked me the question and I was thinking, so this was all happening at the same time. I watched as he stepped 2 steps forward, said, stand clear, and he just took his fist and he just went behind his back. He just went wham on my chest of my body down below. And nothing happened. I didn't feel anything up above. But the second blow to my chest was right after I said, I promise you that I'll get strong enough to leave him. And that blow restarted my heart. He swung his arm the second time, and right as that fist hit my chest, my eyes shut up above, and I was back in my body, and I opened my eyes and looked into his face. So I'm sure they were very happy to have me back. I'm not sure sometimes whether, it's hard to make that choice to come back. If I didn't love my children so darn much, I can't tell you I wouldn't have come back. So I found myself back in my body, and I looked at the doctor, and I started talking into the oxygen mask. Oh my gosh, what just happened? I was up on the ceiling. The nurse leaned over and said, please don't talk. We need to stabilize you. Don't talk. So I had to wait until 20 minutes were over. They finally took the oxygen mask off, and then I blurted it all out. What just happened? I was up on the ceiling, and I could see and hear everything. I'd never heard of a near-death experience. Never had I ever considered that that could possibly be a possibility. The neurosurgeon said, oh, brother. You'd think that would close me down completely, but it didn't. I prayed vivacious, and I said, no. I was up on the ceiling, and I could see and hear everything. She's the person who brought in the oxygen card and put the oxygen mask on my face, and that man brought in the heart monitor and put it on the wall, and I watched my flatline. And you said this to him, and he said that to you, and I recounted their whole conversation. The neurosurgeon, who's really well known in Santa Barbara, actually turned white, and I could see that he was going like this, and he said, I'm not going to stand here and listen to this, and stormed out of the room. You'd think that that would be like a miracle. Oh my gosh. He didn't want to hear that. The orthopedic surgeon and the rest of the team stayed, and he asked me questions. He held my hand, and he asked me questions like, what did you feel, and what did you see? And I talked the whole thing. I said the whole thing of what just happened, what I saw unfolding. And so then they rolled me onto a gurney off the x-ray table, and they took me up to my room, and not a single person would ever say another word to me about it. As much as I begged, I said, please, please, what happened to me? And I'm sure since it was 1987, Life After Life by Raymond Moody had come out in 1975, I'm pretty sure that they'd heard about that. But I hadn't, because I don't watch TV. So I had never heard of anything about Raymond Moody or Life After Life. So I found out years later that the orthopedic surgeon only spoke to me, he told me this directly, because I changed his medical protocols for life. He said, if you could come back from a heart stop, from a cardiac arrest, and flatline, and tell us accurately what was said and done to resuscitate you while your eyes were shut, he said, that is pretty incredible. Yes, I can understand you hearing things past the point of death, but actually seeing who did what was a different case because your eyes were shut. So that was pretty interesting. That particular doctor, wouldn't go on air to admit the issues and talk about it because he said that he still has patients and he doesn't want to affect his reputation. And he told the Discovery Channel that he would admit that I had an NDE, but that was the extent of it. It was really good when the Discovery Channel contacted me to reenact this whole NDE because I had years later written it up after finding out about NDEs. I found a website called the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. That's run by Dr. Jeffrey Long, and he's a good friend of mine now. And when I found that information, literally it was like a godsend to know that other people had had near-death experiences. That when you live with that and it's inside you and no one talks to you about it. By the way, my engineer husband, when I told him what happened, he said, that couldn't have happened, you hallucinated it. So that hospital stay included the surgery and 3 days of stay of me begging everybody that came into my room, and no one ever talked to me, and so I closed down completely to that near-death experience. Today, when I talk about it, it's as real as the day that it occurred for me. But it was about, I'd say, somewhere around 12 or so years after the NDE when I got to open up about it, and it was an interesting moment. I was at a gymnastics practice for that little redheaded daughter, and she was in gymnastics, and I was sitting next to another parent, and she was talking to me. She was a nurse at the hospital, and she was talking to me about how her mom was imminently going to die. So I said, well, I have a story that I could tell you that might make you feel a little bit better. I realized it was a seed. There was a seed there that I could use for good, but I didn't know yet really how to use it. This was the first time I'd ever really come out to talk to anybody about it. And by the way, I need to also add, 3 years after the NDE, I very carefully in those 3 years knew that I had promised God, by the way, that I had to leave. And I very carefully put things into place so that I could leave as gracefully as I could with my husband. And it was still very difficult because he was a very difficult human being. But I got away and I went through divorce. And that was probably, the best thing that could have happened to me because having promised God to do it, it motivated me to go forward with that. And that opened up, as we say, that one door closing allowed another door to open. The door that opened was that 2 years later, after the child custody fight and the very traumatic divorce that a very wonderful attorney helped me through. I was home on a Saturday, and my son came to me, and he was in junior high school, and he had a friend with him, and he said they wanted to go to a movie and wanted me to go. And I said, well, I can't really go because we were planning to move to another location, and I was trying to pack things. And it turned out that they decided that they would go to the movie, and they would go ask this girl's father to go to the movie with them, which he agreed to do. And then they came back over and insisted that I go too. Junior high kids putting their parents together. And 24 years later, my husband Victor. I found an angel. Gosh, he was sent to me, and I could cry about that too, but I won't. Try really hard. I found somebody who totally supports me in everything that I do and is always the wind beneath my wings, like that song. How could that happen? Come from someplace where I'm completely unsupported, where someone never listens to me and cuts me down for who I am, and then to have someone who constantly supports me. How does that happen, guys? How does that happen? Because God does it. He knew I needed to have someone who was there, and He knew that for me to do my purpose, I needed somebody who was going to be my support system. My purpose is to talk about this. I know it now. I know I found it. When I came down from the ceiling that day, I actually didn't know what it was. I knew totally what was up there. And when I came back, that was the only thing that disappeared, was that what my purpose was. So I've drawn some things from all of this that I'd like to pass on to you, and I talked about it yesterday at the IANS meeting. One of them is that we all have a purpose. And that purpose is so important for you to pursue. It's not money. It's not accumulating things. It's not ego. It's not power. It's helping and touching other people's lives in a way that only you can do in that moment or that period of time, and people will come and go, and maybe they're there for you and you need to help them for a day or a moment or a week or a year, but find those cases where you can put yourself and your love and invest that in someone and make a difference in their life. Because I tell you that that's where I find the greatest joy in living past the point of my near-death experience. When I get to find someone that just for a moment or a while I can contribute to in a positive way, whether it just be a hug or whether it be something financially I can do, like to a homeless person, or I can think of someone who's in a trial or having a health issue that I can come through for that they would have never expected. Finding that moment is going to be incredible for you at the end of your life, because near-death experiencers will tell you, those that went beyond where I did, that you will have a life review and you will see those moments. And you will not be judged, but you will look at those moments and you'll be happy in how you contributed to those people that you touched. Of course, we all have those moments where we're not too proud of what we did. You're forgiven for those. We're all human, and we're not expected to be perfect. But it's really something where when you contribute to somebody else, it lights up your life, and you'll see it light you up at the end of your life, because you'll say, wow, look, I did that, and I did that, and I did that, and I did these good things. And I really tried to help other people, and I really tried to be a friend to even people I didn't know. How many of us walk by a homeless person and think, wow, they probably made that life for themselves? I think instead, does it really cost me a lot to give them $2 or $3 and say, I hope you can buy some lunch or breakfast with this? It's not my job to judge what they do with it. It's just my job to be a good person and say, I hope I can help you. So find ways, children and elderly people and handicapped people, to just touch their life for a second. Just give them a moment of your beautiful heart. Because it lights up your life, and it lights up their life. And it'll light you up later, and it'll light them up later when they see that in their life review. Because hopefully they'll respond nicely back to you and get to see it in the reruns when they pass over. One of the other things, I don't know how much time I still have left, it's 12:07. What? I can go on? Okay. I've had a lot of amazing other experiences I want to tell you about, because one of the pieces of my story is to understand that the other side, whatever you want to deem it as, is wanting to help you. And your intuition is part of that. And you need to learn to trust your intuition. And I'll tell you what happened to me last June. I was up talking in San Francisco at 4 different IANS groups, and we were up there for about 5 days. Victor was driving back from San Francisco, and we were in our van, and I had my feet up on the dashboard, and I was relaxed backwards, and we stopped and seen one of our sons in San Luis Obispo. We were heading home, and the way that the freeway works north of Santa Barbara is it's called the 101, and it comes from inland, and it hits the coast, and then it turns southbound, and it's about 30 miles south to Santa Barbara. So it's running literally right above on the cliffs above the ocean. It's a beautiful drive. It's a beautiful drive. It was just dark, and we were driving along, and a big gust of wind hit the side of our van. And coming from Oregon, you guys know about big wind here too. Victor's not really familiar with it. I said, I think we ought to not drive 70. I think we ought to do 50, because we can really go out of control pretty quickly. And he said, okay. So we slowed down to 50. We're driving along, I think everything's okay. And all of a sudden, this happens in my ear. Danger. Big impact ahead. Danger. Big impact. Uh-oh. So I put my feet off the dashboard, and I sat my seat upright, and I checked my seatbelt, and realized I needed to say something to Victor. So I said, Victor, you know how I hear the intuition stuff, and every once in a while I get helped? I said, I just heard that there's a big impact ahead, there's danger. Can we slow down to like 30? And he goes, but we're on the freeway. And I said, yeah, but there's nobody behind us. And so if somebody comes fast, you can just speed up to 50 for a second, and then when they pass us, we can slow back down, because something's scary up ahead. So he has seen this enough times where I get this message from the other side, and so he did it. And we're going along at 30, and we see a police car way up ahead. And it's maybe 5 or 10 miles after I heard the word in my ear. And the first thing I notice is we're coming up on the police car when we're close enough to see, the actual car, is that it's not off the freeway pulling someone over. It's stopped in a slow lane. So that was kind of weird. I was like, why would they stop in a slow lane? And then as we got closer, I realized, okay, there's nobody in the car. Okay, that's kind of weird too. Then as we're coming up 30 miles an hour, and the police car's right here in the slow lane, and we're in the fast lane, and we're doing 30, right about here, somebody grabs me both my shoulders and screams in my ear, 10 miles an hour! So I screamed, I was scared, and I screamed really fast, 10 miles an hour to Victor. And he slowed down really fast, which was really good, because just as our front of our car came level with the back of the police car, our lights then saw what was ahead of the police car, which was a semi-truck that had turned over on its side, so the bottom of the truck with no reflectors on it the cab was in our lane, where the gas tanks are. The middle of the truck was in front of the police car in the slow lane, and the rest of the truck was off the highway in the median. So we were able to swerve off into the left median and not hit the guardrail and go around the front of the truck, and I actually went into kind of a shock mode at that point, and there was just something, that's a big moment in your life. I was like, oh my gosh. And at the far side, I saw that the police officer was climbing up to help the truck driver, checking on the truck drivers. He wasn't, and we found out afterwards, Victor has a picture in his phone of the actual truck. The news sources went out and took a picture of it because it was blocking the entire freeway. What we didn't know is the reason why there were no cars behind us was because the police had blocked the freeway further back, but we were between the block. We were the only car between the block and the truck. So they came through for me. And, I spent the rest of the ride back to Santa Barbara being grateful for that and talking to them and saying how grateful I was. And if there are things that they want me to do to help, this is my honest to God constant prayer. If there's anything I can do to help, to be of assistance, to serve, that I want to do that as much as I possibly can. And I want them always to choose me to put me in a place or give me the capacity to help someone. And so I was talking about that with them, and about 10 miles down the road, Victor goes, "How is it that you're able to do that?" It's not me doing that, is my answer. It's the other side. They want to help us. I don't know if you want to call them angels or your spirit guide or whatever words you want to use. Doesn't matter, they're there. And they want to help. They want to help guide you towards your best life. They want to save you if you have more purpose to do in your life. So when those kind of things happen and you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't go there, enough blocks come up, like Ellen Dye was talking to me yesterday. She was supposed to go, she spoke here, I think, and she was supposed to go to a conference, and she had this block come up, and that block come up, and that block come up, and then finally she looked outside on Memorial Day, and the top of her sunroof was open, and all her windows were down, and she hadn't left her car like that, and her car had two or 3 inches of water in it, and she realized, okay, I'm not supposed to go on this trip. When those kind of things happen, go with the flow and don't go. So one of my things is that they want to help you. They want to be there for you. Then a lot of times we, with our power, say, that's probably not right. I'm feeling this way, but I can ignore it. I'm hearing this and feeling something. I'm going to go past that. I'm going to do what I want to do. So I would definitely suggest, I know all of you are probably on the page already, to listen to your intuition and go out there and do wonderful things in the world. And then when you pass over, don't be fearful. Help other people not to be fearful. It's not scary. Literally, when you die, you feel the best that you've ever felt. I was up on that scene and I was joyous. And you're loved, incredibly loved, no matter who you are. And I want to say one last thing, there is no hell. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I hated that exists here. I do. That's the one thing that frustrates me the most, because when people believe in that, they don't act their true selves. They're acting out of fear instead of out of love. So act out of love. And that's what my story is. And I thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it.